and believe me, there are things that I want to start, and you know, I'm terrified, and I'm keep making excuses, and then I finally do it, and I'm like, what was I waiting for this whole time? But the
Yes.
fear becomes bigger than the thing itself,
Yeah.
and I'm learning that slowly.
Hey, girlfriends, and welcome to another episode of Tracy Gold Show. Today, we are talking about feeling the fear or feeling the resistance and just doing it anyway. I've heard so many women feel like they are too old to do this or it's too late to do that. And actually, this is your time. This is your time to do it anyway. And to speak about this, I have an amazing guest today. Her name is Lisa Congdon, and I hope I'm pronouncing her surname correctly. Congdon, she'll pronounce it properly for us. But she's an artist, and she actually started her art later in life in her 40s, has found incredible success. She creates art for people around the world. She has a phenomenal Instagram following, which is where I found her. She is inspirational. She's also she's just like written so many different books, has her own podcast, which is a new development. And she's going to tell her story to inspire you to just do it anyway with whatever it is in your life you're wanting to do. So, Lisa, thank you so much for coming on the show.
My pleasure. It's great to be here with you, Tracy.
Thank you. So, okay, just let's get it out the way you pronounce your surname.
Oh, Congdon.
Congdon. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So,
Yeah.
Congdon. I was like,
It's
how do I
confusing
pronounce
because
it?
it's 2 syllables. There's like 3 consonants in a row in the middle. It's believe me, I get it. So
You get it.
you did fine.
Thank you. So, Lisa, tell us your story because, I've been following you for a while. I found you on one of the, I did a Google search on the top influencers to follow over 50, and your name came up, and your story is just so powerful. So, just tell us a little bit about you and your story.
Yeah, so I'm 53 now. I turned 54 in January in a few
Mhm.
months. So I'm entering my mid 50s, which feels really strange.
Hmm.
And I am an artist, mostly an illustrator, surface designer. I've also written and illustrated a bunch of books. And now I guess I'm also a social media influencer, which is an interesting thing to call myself. But I didn't actually start making art until I was in my 30s, and I didn't kind of make the break to become a professional artist until I was nearly 40. And that happened really in an interesting way. It's not like I woke up
Mm.
one morning at 33 and was like, I don't like my career. I think I'm going to go to art school and become an artist. It didn't happen like that at all. It was this very kind of like long, winding road. So, to bring you
Mm.
back to the beginning, when I first graduated from college, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I realize now that I just didn't know what all the options were that were available to me. So
Mm.
I did what a lot of young women, at least at that time, did. And I was like, well, I have to go to graduate school for something. I might as well become a teacher.
Mm.
I love kids. So I graduated from college. I went back to school to get my teaching credential, and I taught elementary school in San Francisco, where I lived at the time, for about 7 years. And then the school where I taught got this huge grant. This is when Clinton was in office, and
Mhm.
we got this huge grant, and we needed to organize the how we were going to spend the money at the school, and
Mhm.
I was put in charge of that. And so I left the classroom and sort of became this kind of administrator at the school, and I loved that work. And then from there, I went to work for the nonprofit organization that granted us the money. I kind of got poached, if you will. And
Yeah.
so when I went from this very creative school environment, and at the time, I don't know that I would have said I needed to work in a creative environment. I'm not
Mm.
sure I was aware of that yet. But when I went to work at this office, and I loved that job, but when I went to work there was a real dearth of creativity. Like, I was
Mm.
like doing administrative stuff and doing a little bit of, having a lot of fun with my colleagues and working in education, just not in a creative way with kids anymore.
Mm.
So I felt this kind of hole in my life. Around the same time, I ended a relationship that I had been in for almost a decade. And so I was kind of in a weird, transitional, somewhat dark space. And I think I was
Mm.
in my early 30s at that point. And I decided I was living by myself for the first time. And I decided to like make a little art corner in my kitchen, and I just started messing around with journaling and art. And this was kind of before the internet became a space for artists to share their work. There wasn't even,
Mm.
I think maybe there was Flickr, which is this
I
old,
remember
old
Flickr. I remember.
most women
Yes.
probably watching this also remember Flickr. It's just
Yes.
the kids who don't remember. Anyway, there was no Instagram, no Facebook, nothing like that. And so um, I just started making art in the privacy of my own home. And I was like getting really interested in art and creativity and buying books and checking books out from the library. And then the internet kind of started becoming a space for people to share their work. And I think I joined Flickr, and I started seeing that, making art was something that one could do beyond a hobby. And in my mind, it's like becoming a professional artist was something you went to school for. And I was at that point certainly too old to go back to school, right? Like too old to do anything. I was already 32.
Yeah. 32.
Yeah.
Woo! Like
It's
really on
amazing
the
how we think
edge.
our life is over, right? Already when we're in our early 30s.
Amazing. Yeah.
So, um, I was kind of like coming out of this kind of depressed and anxious period, and partly because I sort of poured myself into journaling and making and
Mm.
reading, and I read Julia Cameron's The Artist Way, and
Oh, that book
yeah,
changed my life. I
yes,
love that book.
it's
Yes.
amazing. And so I just, I started sharing some photos of what I was making, giving things away as gifts to people. And at some point, I was like, I want to do this as a living. And I
Mm.
started kind of seeing pictures of what that could look like based on people I was following on Flickr. And so I had made friends with this woman in San Francisco where I used to live. And she was a professional illustrator. And she said, look, you're super talented. You need to work on your skills. You need to get a website. You need to kind of get some things together. But like, I think you really have potential. So I
Hmm.
asked her a ton of questions about how the industry worked, different ways to make a living as an artist, all of that. And started meeting other people who kind of gave me advice. I started taking classes, not necessarily business classes, but I was taking art classes at local college and
Mm.
kind of honing my skill. And eventually I got to the place where I opened an Etsy shop. I don't have an Etsy shop anymore. I just have a shop on my website, but that's kind of where I
Yes.
started along with a lot of other people,
Hmm.
and started selling stuff. Took a really long time. Eventually in 2007, I decided to leave my job, and I was still making no money.
Yeah.
And at that point I was um in my mid 30s, and I worked really hard for about 3 years or 4 years, and did a lot of side jobs. When it was freelancing for my old place of employment, I opened a shop in San Francisco with a friend of mine, to make some extra money. Not selling my own stuff, but it
Mm.
was like a little gift shop. And I figured out how to pull together an income from all these different kind of diverse sources.
Mm.
And I was like, someday I'm going to make my living as a full-time artist, but I'm going to kind of do it this way for now. And I think because I had all of this life and work experience, being a project manager, being a teacher, had worked at this job, for a really long time. That job that I left teaching to go and work for this nonprofit. I worked there for a good, 7 years, and I
Mm,
learned so much there about, making an agenda, communicating with clients, organizing my time, managing my projects, um, getting things done on deadline. And I had no idea when I left my job to, become a freelance artist and shop owner
mm.
that all of those skills would come in quite so handily, but they did. And
Yeah, especially as an artist, right? Because
yeah,
many artists want to be creative, but they don't know how to do that stuff. That stuff is
right,
something that it's quite a shock to them. Like, oh, actually, if I'm going to
right,
make this into a business, I
right,
need to learn how to work with clients,
right.
work on deadline, all
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. Be
And
more
that's why
business minded. Mm,
we can talk more about this after I'm done telling my story, but I think so much of why women, um, in particular, who have been in these professions where they have been, you know, of service to others, or have had to run, departments, that we bring so much into our art business that has nothing to do with art. It has to do with like, um, getting things done and putting our
mm,
art into the world and being organized about it and knowing how to communicate. And, I always think like, if I decided or understood that I was going to be an artist when I was 23, I would not have had those, skills. And so I feel really grateful that for me, the transition happened a lot later in life because I got to do all these other things and play around with them,
mm.
but then also, got to take them with me. And so I kind of started this business and eventually sold the store that I owned with my friend, started illustrating full time. And the rest is history. That happened in about
Amazing.
2011. So for the last 10 years, I have been full time making art. I have written and illustrated, or a combination of writing and illustrating, 10 different books, two of which are for artists, one of which is called A Glorious Freedom: Older Women Leading Extraordinary Lives. And it's about, stories of women who kind of got a late start like I did. It was a passion project of mine
Mm,
because it's an area that I'm super interested in.
yeah.
Um, and I work with clients all over the world. I do a lot of brand collaborations now. And I also have a fine art practice where I show my work in galleries. I have a shop in the front of my studio, an online shop that, my head of retail runs for me. So I have employees. I'm about to hire another one. So yeah, built this social media following, which is pretty much how I've
Incredible.
managed to, kind of build a following and build a career. And I like to say that, Instagram's changing a lot, but Instagram is really the place where where I was able to build my career, and my
Mm,
career and Instagram's kind of beginning kind of collided at the same time. And so I
mm.
was able to get in there before a lot of algorithms changed and things, and build, a community of people who follow what I do. And I'm really grateful for that.
Yeah, Lisa, that's amazing. And so let's talk a little bit about how women feel stuck in a place where they feel like they can't move forward. So, because I relate a lot to your story also in having, my career has also had its highlight is having its highlights in my 40s and is catapulting as I, get ready to go into my 50s. And I'm so excited about it. And I feel like I've learned so much along the way as an entrepreneur that I didn't know when I was younger, things that there's no way I would have known how to do. But for many women, they're very nervous of starting this
Mhm.
on this path now, but I'm seeing a lot of women doing it, especially because of COVID, right? So many of
Mhm.
us were locked down,
Mhm.
some of us lost our jobs, some of us left our jobs, and now we're rethinking everything. So, what is your advice and thought process that you take women through as you hear their stories and help them to emerge from that fear and just do it anyway?
Yeah, I go on a lot of book tours, or at least I did before COVID. And I
Mm,
was on a book tour for my book, Find Your Artistic Voice, which is a book, for folks who are interested in learning more about how to find their style and how to find their voice. And I was speaking to an audience of about 250 people in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania
Mhm.
in 2019. And I was doing a Q&A after my talk, and this woman stood up and she said, I don't know how old she was. She was probably in her 40s, maybe her early 50s. I'm terrified of, I'm just starting out. I'm so worried that I'm not going to be able to, compare to younger folks, that I don't have what it takes.
Mhm.
I'm really kind of trapped in fear. And what advice do you have for me? And this is a question I get a lot.
Mhm.
And I said to her, you have more creativity, more wisdom, more experience, a longer story, um, uh, more perspective. You have all of these amazing things that contribute to your ability to make really cool art and connect with your audience.
Yeah.
Because really, like, the art that we make is part of our story and part of our voice, but really what's also part of it and what's connected me to my audience is just talking about my journey as a
Mhm.
somebody who's doing this, not right out of college, right? And that I'm self-taught. Like, I taught myself to draw, I taught myself to paint. And a lot of older folks, older women who are entering the creative profession, whether it's as a designer, an illustrator, a fine artist, a writer, a choreographer, a podcaster, whatever, um, we're doing it untrained, right? Like, we didn't go to
Yes.
school for it. And so I think for younger folks, this whole idea of being self-taught is very comfortable for them. Like, but for those of us, over 40, it's like everything was about going, getting schooled, and doing the thing that you got
Yes.
schooled to do.
Yes,
And I also get
exactly.
a lot of women who maybe went to art school and then graduated, had children, either had another profession or were, raising children, and now are coming back
Mm.
to it. So you get a little
Mm.
bit of both. And anyway, so back to this place where I was giving this talk. And so I said that it kind of just, I had never given that answer before, but it just kind of came to me and came out of my mouth. And now
Mm.
I've repeated it a million times. And the room erupted in applause. I mean, people stood up,
Wow.
and it was kind of this moment where I was like, yes, this is it. We have so much of this is mindset. If you
Mm.
go into an experience thinking, I am older and therefore I am less attractive, because so much of our value is put on our physical appearance or our
Mm.
fitness or our beauty, not on, wisdom, excuse me, perspective, life experience, right?
Yeah.
At least in American culture. I think in some cultures it's a little different.
Mm.
And what I love about being older is that, yeah, I mean, I would have made similarly, styled art when I was younger, and maybe my aesthetic would have been similar if I had started as a younger person. But certainly my ability to talk about my life and my art process and my relationships and what I've learned in life, would never have been, what it is today. And I think that
Yeah.
so much of what we have to offer as older women, in the creative field, is our experience and our wisdom, and kind of using our creativity for good in the world. And so that's kind of
Yes.
how I've approached it. And that's what I advise other people to do. Start looking at your experience as your asset, as the thing um, that is, this bounty that you can share, and as
Mm.
the source of your inspiration. And
Yeah.
I'm not the only example of this. There are I have actually lots of friends who got started later, excuse me, in their creative careers. And I feel like the one thing we all have in common, even though our art looks vastly different, is that we have sort of owned this part of our story that we're starting later, and that's what makes our art and our words
Yes.
special. Not
Yes.
necessarily better than anybody else's, just different.
Mm. Lisa, also, what I'm finding so fascinating is that when you look at the statistics around who has the biggest disposable income, like who can buy art, who can buy, people over 50 have a significantly higher disposable income than all of the
Mhm.
other demographics. And so really, if we are speaking to our own people as women over 50, 40, 50, 60 and beyond, surely we're going to want to hear those stories. We're going to want to relate to the artists or the creators in whichever way that is, right? In whatever form that is, with stories that we relate to, with the kind of wisdom. Not to say that youth doesn't bring a freshness and a vitality, and that's exciting too, but we don't just want to see that. We want to see the world that we've lived in. We want to see it in a way that relates to how we experience our world. Would you
There's a
agree with that?
Yes, there's a woman that I interviewed um, for my book, A Glorious Freedom, and she is the oldest park ranger in the United States. And
Mm,
um, she, at the time I interviewed her, was in her mid to late 90s. And I'm not sure if she's still working, but because this was a few years ago. But, anyways,
mm,
she talked to me about how we are obsessed with youth culture,
mm,
and that she has gotten a lot of attention recently because and stories being written about her, because people are realizing that we're living longer and longer.
mm.
It used to be that, if you were in your 50s, you were like potentially on death's door, right? um,
Yes.
we're living longer and longer, and that not just, into your 70s, but like into your 80s, your 90s. And, our
Yeah.
generation is going to live who knows how long, because health care has progressed. We're eating better generally.
Mm.
Um, and all of those things can, and we have more, stimulation. I mean, who knows what's going to kill us sooner too, because
Sure.
the world is a
Right.
mess right now. But and I loved talking to her about this juxtaposition between our obsession with youth culture, but that is slowly shifting, that we need more models for what it looks like to grow old, and that doesn't necessarily mean retiring at 65, um,
Yeah.
or all the very, or just sitting around and watching TV, or getting in an RV and driving around. I mean, not that there's anything wrong with either of those things, but that your older years can look completely different, and they can actually be years where you're super productive, making money, giving back to the
Yes.
world, volunteering, traveling, all of those things. And so many of my students in various classes that I teach are older women who are in their 70s and really interested in learning new things and trying new things and like being fully alive. And to me, that is like the most inspiring
Mm.
uh thing to see as somebody who's 54, right? Because
Yeah.
34-year-olds look up to me, but
Yes.
I also need a role model, right? I
Yeah.
need people who I can look up to and say, I want to be that when I'm 70.
Yeah. Lisa, that's one of the reasons why I started this show, is because I feel like we're kind of the lost generation. We're not our mothers, but we're not our daughters either, whether you have children
Right.
or not. It's just the generation. And we also are the first generation of women that are living this long, funky happening. I mean, look at you. You have two different colors, like,
Yeah. Yeah.
of your earrings, and you have tattoos up on your arms. I mean, like, who would have thought, your mother would look like you do at her age?
I know.
Probably,
Yeah,
probably
I know. And
not,
like,
right?
I mean, a lot of these tattoos I've just gotten in the last 10 years. So I didn't
You
even
see,
actually start getting tattoos until I was about 28. So You know what I
See,
mean?
there we go. So I think, but I feel like we do need to mentor each other through this process. We don't have the mentors before us, the generations before.
Mhm.
So we need to pull together as women of various different ages and multi generational, and to go like, how do we do this thing and how do we do it well? Because one of the things I'm also realizing, Lisa, is that, COVID has come as a big shock to the world. It's also made us realize that, wow, how are we going to live now? If
Mhm.
we've survived this, if we've come out of this and everything
Mhm.
has changed, what are we going to do with this changed world? What do we want our world to look like? What do we want the status quo to be? How
Mhm.
do we want to live in a way that is going to make sure that we thrive and we appreciate what we have and that we're alive and that we live it fully? I mean, there's nothing like lockdown to make us appreciate
I
each
know.
other, right?
It's
Like,
true. It's
I
true.
mean, have you seen that happening in your circles? Have you seen kind of a greater awareness because of COVID, because of all that we've been through in the last year and a half?
Yeah, I think people are really taking stock of um how they live their lives. So
Mm,
many people lost jobs or were forced to work from home, and then the minute they were out of the office, they were like, "What am I doing?"
mm,
I think that there is nothing like a global pandemic
yeah.
to literally every single human being on this planet, even in the
Mm,
most remote areas, knows about it and is dealing with it in some way.
mm,
And there's nothing like that to make us take stock of what I mean, we all go through hard things, and hard things always make us take stock, but it's like this global taking stock, right? That we are
yes.
in this moment, and I'm not sure the moment's going to last, but we are in this moment where career transition, life change, probably divorce, all of
Mm,
those things are happening because people are like, wait, life is short,
yeah.
and life is precious. And I want to do what I want to make the most of it. I also think there's also probably a fair amount of gratitude. I am so
Yeah.
grateful to have a job, or I am so grateful to have my family that I'm living with who is, so wonderful. There's probably also a fair amount of folks who are like, I don't want to allow myself to feel happy and to feel joy because the rest of the world is suffering. I'm
Yes.
sure people are responding to it in all three ways, and probably, depending on
Mm,
the day, all three ways combined. Um,
yes.
but I do see this, taking stock. Where am I?
Mm,
Where do I want to go? Um, how do I really want to live? And
mm,
it's interesting. You asked earlier about this notion of, you know, feeling fear and doing it anyway. And I imagine there are probably a lot of people out there who in the last 2 years have felt very scared for
mhm,
various reasons. And also questioned a lot of how they were living their lives and wanting to make
mm,
changes. A lot of people made huge changes during COVID.
yeah.
And there are probably a number of people who wished they had made changes in the beginning of COVID and now they haven't. It's never too late. Um, and I think, people are always like, why, how do you do all these things? I also am an amateur cyclist, but I race bikes, and much of the time on gravel, lately anyway. And
Wow.
it's kind of dangerous. And but it makes me feel alive. And so people are like, how do you do all these things that are so scary? And I'm like, oh, I feel fear just like anyone else. I
Mm,
just understand, and I think this is potentially something that older people get, or the older you get, the more you understand it, is that that fear never goes away.
mm,
It's actually there for a reason. Fear is healthy, it
yeah.
prevents us from putting ourselves in dangerous situations. Um, but it's also not going to kill you. So um,
Mm,
this feeling it and understanding, letting it move through you, and then doing the thing anyway, knowing that, I think when we're young, we kind of are like, well, if I fail, what will people think? Or
yeah.
I don't want to be an embarrassment. And I found that as I get older, I care less about that. It's not that I don't care what people think. I do.
Yeah.
I don't want to hurt people's feelings. I don't want to be a jerk. But but I care less about what people will think of me if I fail or whatever. So I'm more willing to put myself out there and
Mm,
try things that are scary and new at age 53 than I was when I was 33.
yeah.
And I see that in other people, but I also see a lot of women my age very stuck. And
Mm,
so it is this sort of like knowing the not waiting until the fear goes away because it's never going to go away, just doing it anyway and letting the fear sort of pass through you because it's way more
yeah.
thrilling on the other side of whatever it is you want to do.
Yeah, I think I relate a lot to what you're saying because it isn't about waiting until the fear subsides because the fear is going to be there. It's just deciding, well, I'm not going to let it stop me. And also to embrace it a little bit, like you say, because that does make it thrilling.
Right,
That
right.
does make it quite exciting. And like, who doesn't want more excitement in our lives, right? I mean, like, who wants to be bored and never do anything fun? And, well, I don't know, maybe some people do, but then, you know, are you thriving? Are you thriving in your life? Are you living your life fully? And if not, it's worth dealing with the fear to be able to
Mhm.
have a thriving, beautiful, live fully life. I
Yeah, and
believe it is.
I
You
agree.
know?
And I think that I talk a lot about this notion of begin anyhow because
Mm,
you're always going to find some excuse
mm,
um to keep you from starting, right? And really it's to cope with your fear. So I don't have the right space. I don't have enough money. I don't have the right supplies. I don't have childcare. I don't
mm.
have this. I don't have that. It's there's always something.
Yeah.
And that's always going to be the case. Literally, you will never have the perfect moment to start something.
Mm,
So you might as well begin anyhow, right? And
mm,
I think that is kind of my mantra. And believe me, there are things that I want to start, and you know, I'm terrified, and I'm keep making excuses, and then I finally do it, and I'm like, what was I waiting for this whole time? Like the
yes.
fear becomes bigger than the thing itself.
Yeah.
And I'm learning that slowly.
Yeah, I agree. Lisa, I think you're right in saying that fear is there for a reason. It's there as our protection mechanism, but most of the things that we fear are not going to kill us. It's like we don't know how to determine, well, which are the fears that we actually do need to deal with and which are the fears that are just kind of there.
Right.
And I think society is throwing a lot of stuff at us, but we also have the choice as to whether we take it on or not.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah,
So there is
definitely.
ageism. Like one of the women that I interviewed, she was saying, Valerie was saying, well, there is racism, there is sexism, there is ageism, but I'm not taking that on.
Mhm.
Like, I choose not to embrace that and to let it determine how I live my life. And so I think there's also that responsibility that we have to determine what do we want to take on? What do we want to let become our identity? And ultimately, it's our responsibility how we live our lives.
It's true. Actually, I've been known to say, and it's part of a recent book that I published, agency, responsibility is agency. So if you put yourself in the place of being a victim, like I'm too old, I'm too this, I'm too that, these external conditions exist that are bigger than me, you're putting yourself in the place of being a victim. But if you say, those things exist, they are real,
Mm,
but I am going to um, take responsibility for my own behavior and my own chart my own path, and I'm going to take responsibility for whatever it is I need to do. And that puts you in a place of being an having agency, being an agent to create your life.
mm,
And that was like such a huge shift for me in my 30s. I was somebody who always thought of herself as a victim of bad luck and of
mm,
other people's whims. And I was like, oh, wait a second. I have choices. I have a choice not to be that person's friend or not to get into a relationship with that person. I have a
yeah.
choice not to interact with people who are toxic, you know? And once I realized that and started enacting it, And bad things still happened in my life. It wasn't like
Sure.
all of a sudden, but I had this perspective that I was going to take responsibility, and I was going to use these difficult situations as an opportunity to learn and grow and then shift into
Mm,
the next level of a better life, right? And
mm,
all of those things are teachers to us, all of the crappy things that happen to us. And
yeah.
but you have to take responsibility, and you have to take those opportunities and use them, as opposed to sitting back and saying, well, I can't.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And only you can do that. No one can do that for
Mhm,
you. You
mhm.
have to do that
It's
yourself.
true. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Lisa, this was amazing. And so, yeah, I feel inspired. I feel like, wow, like what new thing do I want to do? Oh, at the moment I'm learning hula hooping. That's my new
Oh,
thing.
wow.
Yeah, I'm like, ooh, I'm quite bruised, in fact, but I need to. In fact, after this, I have my hula hoop session coming up soon. So yeah, it's amazing, and it's so much fun. It gives me like this excitement of like, wow, I can do this new thing. I can learn
Right.
this new technique. I
Well,
want to do it like from a dancing perspective, you know. So
yeah, and a lot of that stuff is a little traumatizing for people, or triggering, right? Like my friend Anna, who has a studio across the hall,
mm,
she and I go to the same personal trainer. And I can't do jump rope because my knee is bad, but I learned to jump rope when I was growing up. But Anna
mhm,
never learned to, she's in her 40s. She never learned how to jump rope.
mhm,
So Emma, our trainer, um, is having her learn how to jump rope. And we were in the hallway the other day, catching up, and she's like, yeah, Emma, I could only get through five. And before I was like tripping over, and she's like, I felt like I was 13 again. And,
mm,
everybody was laughing at me, even though Emma would never laugh at her, but it was more just like what it brought up for her.
yeah,
And so I think that's another thing, that a lot of times we want to do things that maybe we were told we weren't good at when we were little. Like a
mm,
lot of women in their 40s are interested in being more athletic, but maybe they were always told as a kid they weren't athletic, or they were uncoordinated, or they want to make
yeah,
art. They were always told that, that was something that was for other people, not them. That was a
yes,
big thing I had to overcome, because I was the least artistic person in my family growing up, and not the creative one at all, in terms
mm,
of, my like childhood mythology that my parents created for me. And so, I was listening to her, and I was like, that's such an important realization, Anna, that you were in the
mm,
pain of being 13, and yet you're going to overcome it. And eventually she's going to get to 100, and she's going to feel so darn good about it,
yes,
especially because she had to kind of work through all this pain to get there. And sometimes
exactly.
the pain is where the magic happens. We don't realize that. We avoid it all the time.
Sometimes the
Mhm.
pain is where the magic happens. That's very true. That's very
Yeah.
true, Lisa. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us and just the things that you've learned, and so openly as well. Where can people find you, Lisa? Because I mean, I found you on Instagram, but where can people find you?
Yeah. So on Instagram, it's just my name, at Lisa Congdon. I was an early adopter, so I, I have my name as my Instagram. My website is like a font of information about where to buy my products, my books, listen to my podcast, which is called the Lisa Congdon Sessions, if people are interested in tuning in. And yeah, so that's basically it for me. I also have a studio in Portland with a shop in front. We're open a couple days a week. So if you're ever in
Yay.
Portland, you should stop by.
Amazing. And so I will be putting your IG handle on the screen for those who want to connect with you. And then also for those who have a description box, there will be the link to her website inside the description box. And if you're new to the show, keep watching, because we have amazing interviews with very inspirational women telling their stories that will inspire you to live your best life at any age. And if you want to stay in touch with us, feel free to go to our website, tracygoldshow.com. It's TRACY. Gold is in the color, show.com, and there will be a pop-up straight away, and it will give you the option to join the insiders list, which will mean you'll get a newsletter once a week with the replays and all the fun things that we have planned coming up. So thank you so much, Lisa. This has been amazing. I feel like I don't know who gets more inspired, the viewers or me.
Thank
So
you.
thank
You're
you.
so kind. This was really fun. Thank you for
Thank you
inviting
so
me.
much. Awesome.
Okay.
Thanks so much. Enjoy
Bye.
your day. Bye-bye.